I'm Michael Barbaro.
Okay, guys, so if you watch this channel, you know that I spend a lot of my time on this program praying to the gods of YouTube, praying to it, please, Jesus, for the love of Jesus Milhouse Christ, don't ban me from YouTube for, because of this cancel culture for my, what I call borderline content, okay? So in this episode, in this piece, I call them these videos pieces, in this piece of shit, I will be using what we call coded language, okay? So because I have no idea what I can get banned for on this thing, this platform or whatever, we're going to be talking about a kind of controversial thing, and the name for this thing is Labrador. You know that dog Labrador? Just take off the rador part, and then that's the first word, and then the second word is your pipes do this. Drip, drip, drip. What are they doing? It's those two words put together, and we'll just call it the drip. I was kind of reading and looking around, got kind of interested in the origin story, and what scientists are saying about the origin of the pandemic. And I'm kind of just reading. What are they saying? Let me give you some of the basics first, and then we'll get into the more odd, weird, interesting thing that's going on here. I'll just read you this headline. WHO China report suggests COVID-19 passed from bats to humans through another animal. And they published this March 29th, 2021. And just to skip ahead, here's their theories and the likelihood of these theories. Bats through another animal. Okay? Idea number one. Bats through another animal. Very likely. Direct spread from bats to humans. Likely. Cold chain food products. Possible, but not likely. And then here at the bottom, whatever, I'll just say it. Laboratory leak. Extremely unlikely. A little twist here. Oh, a twist. On Tuesday, the World Health Organization released a joint report, blah, 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 blah. That's what we read. It concluded, among other things, that the lab leak hypothesis was, quote, extremely unlikely. But WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom, whatever his last name is, said he does not believe the team's assessment of the lab leak possibility was extensive enough. Here's a quote from this guy, this WHO director, World Health Organization director. Although the team has concluded that a laboratory leak is the least likely hypothesis, this requires further investigation. Ooh, okay. Potentially with additional missions involving specialist experts, which I'm ready to deploy, he told WHO members according to a written statement. And then another development in the story, just a couple days ago, in the Science magazine, a letter was published from a bunch of very important scientists, including this guy, Ralph Baric, who Ralph Baric is you can look him up, but he's like one of the leading scientists in the world studying coronaviruses. So they write this letter, and here, I'll just read you the most summarizing and important part of it. So here's what they say. As scientists with relevant expertise, we agree with the WHO Director General, blah, 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 that's the guy who we just read, the United States and 13 other countries and European Union, that greater clarity about the origin of this pandemic is necessary and feasible to achieve. We must take hypothesis about both natural and laboratory spillover seriously until we have sufficient data. Okay, so basically, let me just summarize what we've learned so far, because this is going to get interesting. It's going to take a little twist, a little twisty pie, okay? But basically what they're saying is we don't know where this came from. We don't know where this came from, and we don't want to rule anything out, so let's get a more in-depth investigation of everything, basically. We don't have enough, we don't know. These are scientists, okay? And if you've ever interacted with scientists, which I do all the time, they're tedious. They're like, ooh, let's investigate this. You know, you'll be at like you're getting new tires on your car, and they're like, ooh, let me investigate. What is this, rubber? And you're like, oh my God, stop investigating. I just want to get out of here. So they want to, they want more research into this. They want to investigate as much as they can. And that's basically where we're at. We don't know. We don't know nothing. And they're like, we didn't really investigate the a laboratory thing as much as we could. So let's investigate that. And blah, blah, blah. We need to investigate everything. Again, it all comes down to we don't know. We don't have any real evidence. And so there's a summary. The guy, I pointed out that guy, Ralph Barrick, because he is kind of the man. He's the man for coronavirus.
Make pee-pee.
For coronavirus research. And I want to read you a quote from New York Magazine, did a little interview with him, and I'll read you something that he said about this. Barrick said he still thought the virus came from bats in southern China, perhaps directly or possibly via an intermediate host. Although the smuggled pangolins, in his view, were a red herring. I don't know if you remember that. People were talking about pangolin. Are they trying to say penguins? Pangolins were a red herring. The disease evolved in humans over time without being noticed, he suspected, becoming gradually more infectious. So this thing was like in people. We didn't really know about it. Could be there's lots of rural parts of China could have been out there. There's lots of bats living in people's houses. On and on. That's what he suspects. Becoming gradually more infectious, and eventually a person carried it to Wuhan and the pandemic took off. Then he said, can you rule out the laboratory escape? The answer in this case is probably not. So this is a long setup to the meat of what I wanted to talk about, which is that while I was reading about this, I noticed a kind of pattern. A lot of videos and definitely a lot of replies and posts to articles and stuff where people are like, it's from a lab. It's from a lab. And then a lot of the times I would see a link to guess who? Bret Weinstein, YouTube's own and Joe Rogan's own Bret Weinstein, who, if I were trying to discover where this certainty, because a lot of people are very certain that this came from a lab. They're certain, despite the fact that scientists have no real evidence for this. They're certain it came from a lab. If I had to discover where did this certainty come from, if I were tracing, if I were doing contact tracing for this, one of the main clusters of starting points of this certainty would be a little guy goes by the name Bretford Weinstein. Here we go. The JRE, the Joe Rogan Experience, and we got Bret Weinstein on here. Is it Bret? Is he Bret? Yes, Bret. Okay, here we go.
Is that, huh? And I looked into it, and immediately I saw the story adds up. You know, it's a coronavirus of a kind that's known to circulate in bats. There's a seafood market, and I thought, okay, I know what the story is, and I tweeted. I don't know enough about the story yet, but looks to me like the Wuhan seafood market is the source, that the virus comes from bats, and we have to talk about the bushmeat trade, which has always been a terrible idea. And immediately people tweeted back at me, so you think it's just a coincidence that there's a biosafety lab level 4 in Wuhan where this started? And I thought, what? That's a heck of a coincidence. And so I started to look into it. I retracted the tweet. I said, maybe I don't know enough about the story yet. And I started to look into it. And I went down the rabbit hole.
This is kind of weird. I don't know what to make of this, if he just maybe messed up or if I missed something here. But he's saying this like it's a secret. Like, there's a virology lab in Wuhan, and that's where the outbreak started. I mean, so I'll just read you this. How China's Batwoman hunted down viruses from SARS to the new coronavirus. Wuhan-based virologist Shi Zhengli has identified dozens of deadly SARS-like viruses in bat caves, and she warns there are more out there. So this honestly, this is a lady who goes into caves to study bats to try to figure out what's going on with these diseases, and they call her the Batwoman. It's pretty cool, right, guys? And we'll get back to the scientists and how this kind of stuff that Bret Weinstein is doing, how that affects scientists doing this work, like Batwoman. But he's like, I put it together. Oh, what a weird coincidence. This is where the outbreak started, and there's a virology institute there. Well, yeah, it's because they're studying that. This woman goes into the caves, and by the way, this was published on June 1st, 2020. She goes into caves to study where there's a concentration of coronavirus inside of these bats. She also studied SARS-like viruses too. So this is not he's like he discovered some secret from somebody who tweeted. No, that's why those scientists are there.
Unaware of. And so one of the questions I have is, this virus is highly transmissible unless you're outdoors. Then it seems almost not transmissible. That's very conspicuous. I mean, for one thing, bats live outdoors, right? So look, it's good to speculate on this stuff. What happened? Hey, I'll throw out some questions. I do this a lot. Like I'll be out somewhere and I'll say like, hey, what if a dog had shoes on? And people are like, and I'm like, I'm just asking questions, So he's throwing out some questions, and that's fine. That's good. But this guy on YouTube pointed this out. And again, I'm not a biologist, so you guys correct me if I'm wrong on this. But this evolutionary biology guy, this biology teacher on YouTube, he pointed out like Eric Weinstein, as an evolutionary biologist, should know that bats often prefer caves. They prefer to be inside, some would say. They even, it's not called nesting, but they live in people's attics and houses a lot too. Let me just read this, just so we can get a little bit more clarity here. Where do bats live? Where do bats live? This thing asks. Bats can be found in almost all parts of the world and in most regions of the United States. And as somebody who lives in a city that's known for the bats flying around, ooh, look at the bats. Let's go stare at the bats. I can confirm that they live like this. In general, bats seek out a variety of daytime retreats, such as caves. This is sort of like the first. If you had to think, what's the next word to think of after you think of bats? Gotta go cave. Hey, Batman's going to his bat outside. Such as caves, rock crevices, old buildings, bridges. That's in my city, they do that. Mines and trees. Different species require different roost sites. Some species such as Mexican free-tailed and gray bats live in large colonies in caves. So you get the point. Bats live in condensed together, all huddled together in enclosed spaces. So we're off to a bad start already with this theory, but hey, that's okay. It's okay. And this is basically the rest. It's he's speculating a lot. And in fact, there's pretty much every other claim he makes about microorganisms and all this stuff and viruses he's like, it could be. He even says, he's like, could be. I don't know. Seems weird. Could be. And I'll put a link to the Joe Rogan thing, but that's literally it. He's like, this is kind of weird. And by the way, this is the perfect Joe Rogan material. This Bret Weinstein appearance on the JRE, as I call it, to save time, this is a perfect Joe Rogan situation. It's got everything. It's got all the things Joe Rogan fans like. Conspiracy. Ooh, something that they're not telling you. There's something that they're not telling you. And as Bret Weinstein goes on about later, you're not allowed to say it because the woke canceltins, that's what I call them, the canceltins. The canceltins will cancel you if you say that it's from a lab. By the way, Trump said this too. They'll cancel you. Joe Rogan's so worried about being canceled. He had some interview recently where he was like, you're not allowed to be a white guy. You're not allowed to be a white guy. You're not allowed to say what you feel if you're a white guy. He's so worried about being canceled. He's the least canceled person in the history of humanity. Joe Rogan is the guy who nobody should be listening to advice on anything he says, yet has the ears of every English-speaking person on the planet. And he's, I'm going to get canceled. Calm down, buddy.
Swing thing. For whatever reason, you get labeled a right-wing conspiracy theorist if you think it came out of a lab.
Right.
And people on the left are so they're so willing to dismiss that without any real evidence. We've been poisoned by these ideologies when it comes to conspiracy or whether or not something is actually true, but we've been fed the wrong information. That stuff is, if you don't believe the official narrative that's being discussed on CNN, you must be some sort of a right-wing nut.
Right.
Look, as a far-left communist, a far-left communist anarchist, I have to, pinko communist, I call myself, I have to say to Joseph, is someone please clip this and forward it to Joseph? I fully embrace them researching and finding out whether this came from a lab. 100%. 100% do it. And don't spend too much of my tax money. But I fully support it. 100%. No taboo. Say whatever you want. Oh, Joseph Rogan's going to get canceled. Spotify is going to tell him to shut up. No, go ahead. I've got zero problems with looking into this lab more. Zero. Maybe you can meet that Batwoman. She sounds cool. Most important question, is the Batwoman cute? Let me take a check. All right, so skip forward a little bit. Now we come to January 29th, 2021, year of our Lord, and Bret Weinstein goes on Bill Maher's show. Another guy who seems really preoccupied with being canceled. Oh, will I be canceled? No. That's my really well done Bill Maher. The Chinese. That's my Bill Maher. Please don't copy it.
And that theory was demonized at first, that, it can't, come on, that's conspiracy thinking, that it would started in the lab. But it certainly is a 50-50, would you say that?
Oh, it's far more likely than that. As a matter of fact,
Right.
I said, I think in June, that the chances that it came from the lab looked to me to be about 90%.
Okay.
So this was never a conspiracy.
So this is the big problemo that I got here. I'm not trying to cancel nobody, okay? I'm a far left communist. I'm not trying to cancel nobody. I say go and do it. Let's see what let's see what the research returns. But somehow, despite these scientists saying, we don't know, let's look into it more, Bret Weinstein is 90% sure. He just said he's 90% sure that this thing came from a lab. Is it possible? Again, let's go through this. Is it possible that this thing came from a laboratory? Yes, it's still possible. Is it likely, according to the top guy, the main dude, who is going to come back up in a second in an interesting way with this story? Probably not. Probably not. Okay? And part of the reason that they're saying that's because there's no evidence for the lab thing. There's nothing really connecting it. Bret Weinstein has some theories, as he discussed on Joseph Rogan, the Jerry. He's got some, this is odd. Go and watch. I'll put the clip. He's like, this is odd. Like, he's got that. He's got no proof that this thing came from a lab. You're going to need some proof to start making this claim. Part of the reason you're going to need proof is because if it did come from a lab, that probably means there's some kind of a cover-up happening. And if you're going to make that kind of a accusation against my girl, the Batgirl, you're going to have to answer to me. I'm kind of losing it, but you get what I'm saying here. These people, this woman, people like this, they're really putting themselves at risk. They're dealing with bats all day. They're dealing with dangerous viruses like SARS and stuff. And then YouTuber Bret Weinstein comes out and he says, they're doing a cover-up. They're doing a cover-up and da-da-da-da-da. And I know I have no real proof. I have nothing connecting any of this stuff. I have no direct evidence tying this to the lab. I have some speculation, but I'm 90% sure. Oh, God. Turn YouTube off. Okay, here we go. So we skip ahead. Just a couple days ago, they uploaded this. The Dark Horse Pod. And we've talked about this, okay? There's a lot of creative people watching this. You're creative, okay? They're calling this the Dark Horse Podcast. Just call it your name, okay? You have a podcast, call it Greg. the Greg Berenson show or whatever, okay? None of this like, what's another one? The Swordsmith's Wiltshire quest. The Warhammer Halo experience featuring David. No, just call it your name. It's the David Show.
Is a viable hypothesis, and it should have been investigated seriously from the beginning rather than dismissed as it has been. But what I want to do is put it in context. So, first thing to say is that the most important thing about this letter is the third author. The third author is Ralph Barrick, and Ralph Barrick is the lead investigator, the PI, in the UNC lab that does gain-of-function research on bat-borne coronaviruses. It's one of the 2 leading labs in the world for this.
Okay, so he's talking about the guy who we talked about earlier, Ralph Barrick. He signed on to this letter that says, I'm put a link to that too, that says, hey, we need to investigate this more. No conclusions, no percentages, nothing. No evidence. They say, let's investigate this more because we don't know. That was what the letter said. And he's right about this too, that Ralph Barrick is one of the main dudes for studying coronavirus and beep up. And he's like, hey, Ralph Barrick, here we go.
Kind of work, the other one being at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the Zhengli lab. And so to have one of 2 people at the very forefront of this technology come forward and author a letter that says this is a viable hypothesis and should be fully investigated is to say we have been right all along. This was a plausible hypothesis from the beginning, deserving of scientific respect, which is the opposite of what it got. What it got.
Make pee-pee.
So, no, you weren't right all along. You went on just a couple months ago, Bill Maher's podcast, and said that you're 90% sure. There's nothing like that in that letter. And in fact, I can read the guy who he's like, oh, this is the guy. This is confirmation of our beliefs. I'll read his quote again. Ralph Barrick in the New York Magazine interview. Barrick said he still, just from a couple months ago, Barrick said he still thought the virus came from bats in southern China, perhaps directly or possibly via an intermediate host. Although the smuggled pangolins thing he doesn't believe, the disease evolved in humans over time without being noticed, he suspected, becoming gradually more infectious, and eventually a person carried it to Wuhan and the pandemic took off. And this seems to be the reason he's saying this. This top guy, the main guy for coronavirus study, the reason he's saying this is because this is what most scientists who study this stuff believe. Okay? So we're not ruling out that there's a lab thing, and it really seems like a lot of what's going on here is that they want to rule it out so that their colleagues like Batgirl can not have to deal with this conspiracy theory stuff anymore. Now, again, is it possible it came from the lab? Yes, still. But I suspect, based on what they're saying, and you can even read the letter, I suspect that this might have a part of it. That people are spreading this stuff and they really want to believe it, and they want to clear their colleagues. Okay? Sorry. So in summary, Joe Rogan, calm down. You're literally the least canceled person on the planet. It's never going to happen to you. He was like in that interview, he was like, we're not going to even be able to go outdoors. White guys, we're not even going to go outdoors anymore. I've been canceled. Did Spotify just dump gold bricks on Joe Rogan? Is that how that deal went? Joe Rogan, you're not going to get canceled. Bats live in enclosed spaces surrounded by each other, and they pass viruses to each other. Gross. Ugh. And that cool woman has the cojones. She has I say stuff like that now, cojones. She has the cojones to go and like grab them and get blood samples from them. And there's an Institute of Virology in Wuhan because people like her are doing real work and not just goofing around, which I wouldn't know anything about, on YouTube. All right? Do we have a problem here? And of course, this could all be proven wrong. And I am totally open to that possibility that they'll do some research and find that that it came from a lab. But right now, there ain't nothing for that. Okay? That's why they're saying, let's research it. You got some suspicions? Okay, great. But so far, even the guy he's mentioning says it probably came from bats, like all this other crap, because bats are wandering around with their stupid little weird pinchy faces filled with coronavirus, which is how this virus is spread. Okay? Mr. 90%. I mean, come on. And they're both like biology PhDs, and you throw off your ethics as a scientist this quickly for clicks? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Grabby hands, grab all they can, to quote the great Depeche Mode. When it comes to clicks, grab all you can, and I will see you guys later.
I'm Michael Barbaro.
Bye-bye. Hey everybody, and thanks so much for watching this video. Like all the other YouTube and podcast perverts, I now have a Patreon. Every week on this Patreon, I'm uploading 2
exclusive
Patreon-exclusive shows. They're like real shows, more produced, more edited.
a behind-the-scenes show where I reveal all my secrets, and a show where we go deep on an important topic that you will want to know about. Also, you get the daily and complete live show audio-only feeds. And at the top level, for only 25 bones, you can become a producer. These people that you're seeing right here make this program possible. Without them, nothing. It goes right in the toilet, right in the trash, and we set it on fire. It's these people who make it work. So please, for Christ's sake, become a patron. Bye-bye, love you.